Welcome to Alfred Kazin Notes, a place where literature, ideas, and the minds of great writers come alive. Let's explore the thoughts behind the words. Imagine what you would do if you woke up in a strange, oval-shaped bed.
Yeah, with absolutely no context, just waking up out of nowhere.
Right. You open your eyes, and a cold, emotionless computer voice simply asks you, what's 2 plus 2? And you realize, you can't remember your name. You can't remember your past.
It's pure isolation.
Completely. And when you try to move, you find you are entirely at the mercy of these terrifying brushed steel robotic limbs. The protagonist actually calls them the arms of harassment.
Which is a great name for them, honestly.
It really is. They're swooping down from the ceiling to forcefully feed you this gray slurry, and they're shaving your body while you slip in and out of consciousness. So today we are navigating the unsettling, mind-bending journey of Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, really dissecting a story of survival, the rigid laws of science, and the terrifying void of space.
And, the disorientation of that opening is entirely palpable because the horror doesn't just stop at the sterile robotics or the amnesia.
Oh, not at all. It gets so much worse.
Right. When the protagonist finally gathers enough physical strength to just look around this stark white room, he turns to check on his fellow crewmates. And he finds these deeply desiccated, mummified corpses.
Just absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, their skin resembles dry leather. I mean, they are hollowed out husks. He is entirely alone. He has no identity, but this deeply buried instinctual terror tells him one absolute truth. He is on a ship built to save humanity, and the people meant to help him are dead.
Think about the pure psychological weight of that. It's like you wake up in the ultimate intensive care unit where the doctors are just mindless, ceiling-mounted robot arms.
Yeah.
Your roommates look like forgotten, gruesome Halloween decorations. And your own brain has locked away your identity. You're left with nothing but this creeping, icy terror that the survival of the human race is somehow, entirely resting on your deeply confused shoulders.
It's a lot to process.
To say the least. But as viscerally terrifying as this micro-horror of isolated amnesia is, the reality of the macro-horror threatening Earth it's so vast it almost defies comprehension.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the threat to Earth isn't a hostile alien invasion or, a rogue asteroid hurtling toward us. It's an infection.
But not a normal infection.
Exactly. Not a biological infection of the planet itself, but of the sun. The sun is infected by this microscopic spacefaring algae dubbed Astrophage.
Tooth algae.
Space algae. And this organism reproduces exponentially, and to do that, it literally consumes the sun's electromagnetic energy.
Wait, so it's literally eating the sun?
Yeah, it acts like a perfect biological battery. It absorbs the star's energy, converting that energy into mass to store it, and then it moves along this 37 million kilometer arc.
The Petrova line, right?
Right, the Petrova line, stretching from the sun all the way to Venus, where it utilizes the carbon dioxide in the Venusian atmosphere to actually breed.
Let's just, break down the sheer scale of that mechanism for a second. A microscopic algae is eating a star. And because it reproduces exponentially, the timeline for human survival is just a rapidly ticking clock.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't take much to destabilize a planet's energy budget at all. A mere 10% drop in the sun's luminosity is enough to trigger a catastrophic, sudden ice age on Earth.
Just 10%.
Just 10%. And a drop like that doesn't just mean, we have colder winters. It means the total collapse of the global food chain.
Right, the crops fail.
Exactly. Wheat, rice, soy, all the foundational crops of human civilization will fail globally. It leads mathematically and inevitably to the extinction of humanity. And the author connects this fictional crisis to the real-world climate urgency we frequently discuss regarding the mid-2020s, specifically the year 2026.
Which is terrifyingly close.
Very. And in the narrative's premise, humanity's industrial carbon emissions, the very global warming phenomenon researchers spent decades trying to mitigate, actually created a thermal buffer.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. By artificially preheating the planet through greenhouse gases, humanity accidentally delayed the deep freeze by just a tiny fraction. The narrative frames it with this really dark irony, stating, "We fell in poop and came out smelling like roses."
We fell in poop and came out smelling like roses. That is incredible. But it only buys them just a little bit of time, right? The proposed solution back on Earth is where things get truly desperate.
Unbelievably desperate.
So the global relief effort is driven by this absolute authoritarian administrator named Strat, who just wields unquestioned, unprecedented power. And to buy time for this ship, the Hail Mary, to travel to another star system and find a cure, Strat proposes radical geoengineering.
Right, the Antarctica plan.
Exactly. The plan is to literally detonate nuclear weapons to purposefully shear off the Antarctic ice shelves.
Which sounds completely unhinged, but the underlying physics of her plan is brutal but scientifically grounded.
So the methane, right.
Right. Trapped beneath those Antarctic ice shelves are massive catastrophic reserves of methane, and methane is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. So by nuking the ice, Strat intends to release all that methane into the atmosphere at once, intentionally superheating the Earth.
Wow.
It is a desperate, temporary stopgap against the cooling sun.
Wait a minute, though. Detonating nuclear weapons on the planet's largest ice shelves.
Yeah.
Aren't they just, like, trading one apocalyptic scenario for another? I mean, how does intentionally destroying the Earth's biosphere, flooding all the coastlines, and causing immense ecological devastation make any logical sense as a cure?
Well, it doesn't make sense as a cure, but it makes sense as a delay. It is the absolute pinnacle of utilitarian mathematics.
Yeah.
Strat operates on this binary calculation. A ruined, flooded, methane-choked Earth is infinitely preferable to a dead, frozen Earth.
I guess when you put it like that.
Yeah, you cannot afford to mourn the ecology of a specific biome or even the displacement of billions of people along the coastlines when the alternative is the absolute zero extinction of the entire biosphere.
You break the planet's legs to prevent it from bleeding to death.
Exactly. But Earth cannot out-engineer the death of a star indefinitely, you know? The methane greenhouse effect is just a delay tactic. Humanity must look outward. So they launched the Hail Mary on a desperate one-way mission to Tau Ceti, which is a star 12 light years away.
And why Tau Ceti specifically?
Because it is the singular local star that is mysteriously immune to the astrophage infection.
Right. So our protagonist, who eventually pieces his memory together enough to remember his name is Ryland Grace, arrives at Tau Ceti. But surviving the trip involves the brutal reality of relativity. He doesn't just travel through space, he travels through time.
Yeah. Time dilation is a really critical factor here. Because the Hail Mary uses astrophage as a highly efficient fuel to travel near the speed of light, relativity dictates that time moves differently for the traveler than it does for the observer back home. For Grace, the journey takes just a few years of subjective time. But back on Earth, decades are passing. He carries this intense psychological weight of knowing that the people who launched him are either incredibly old or already dead from the collapsing food chain.
He arrives carrying all that trauma, only to discover he actually isn't the only one looking for answers in this star system. His ship's sensors detect an alien vessel. He dubs it the Blip A. And the structural description of this ship immediately tells Grace he is dealing with something entirely outside human understanding.
Yeah, because the ship is shaped completely out of flat, angular surfaces.
Which is bad, right?
Any human engineer will tell you that flat surfaces are the absolute worst possible design for a pressurized space vessel.
Why is that?
Well, when you have a vacuum on the outside and internal atmospheric pressure pushing out, flat panels create massive stress concentrations at the seams and the corners.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's why our spacecraft, our submarines, and even like airplane windows are cylindrical or spherical. It distributes the pressure evenly. So the fact that this alien ship defies that fundamental engineering principle proves instantly that whoever built it operates under entirely different laws of material science.
And they likely evolved under entirely different atmospheric and biological pressures, too.
Exactly.
So when Grace finally makes contact with the alien engineer from the 40 Eridani system, this being he names Rocky, that biological divergence is terrifyingly apparent. I mean, Rocky looks roughly like a 5-armed spider with a carapace made of thick, impenetrable rock.
Right, and he breathes ammonia.
Ammonia. He lives in a crushing atmospheric pressure at 210 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to instantly boil the water inside a human body. He has no eyes. He navigates his environment using this highly advanced biological sonar, and he communicates entirely in complex musical chords.
And you know, the real genius of the narrative is how it handles this encounter. We are so used to the lazy sci-fi trope of the magical universal translator.
Oh yeah, where the alien speaks perfect English after 5 minutes of listening to a radio broadcast.
Exactly. Weir strips all that away. Grace and Rocky have to establish language from absolute painstaking scratch. They rely on the only universal truths that cannot change from planet-to-planet mathematics and the laws of physics.
Just think about how isolating it is to travel to a country where you don't speak the language. Now imagine neither of you even breathe the same gas or see the same light spectrum or share a single cultural reference point. Like, how do they even begin to bridge that?
Well, they do it by using observable physical constants. They actually use a standard analog clock.
Okay.
Grace shows Rocky the ticking second hand. The physical movement of that hand sweeping across the dial is a shared observable event. So Grace maps that specific duration to a sound, establishing a baseline unit of time.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
Right. And from there, they use measuring tapes to establish units of distance, and they use the fundamental wavelengths of light emitted by specific chemical elements to build an Excel spreadsheet of shared physical constants.
An Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. It is a grueling, magnificent depiction of communication grounded entirely in the scientific method.
It's literally like two shipwreck survivors from entirely different centuries washing up on a deserted island and figuring out how to build a radio together using only a dictionary. They have absolutely nothing in common except their desperation and the inescapable laws of the physical universe.
But the wild thing is, nested within those massive physical differences, they discover profound evolutionary overlaps. Rocky can hear the exact same audio frequencies as Grace.
Really? That seems like a bit of a convenient coincidence now.
It might seem like it, but there's a deep biological logic to it. The sound of a predator colliding with prey or an avalanche falling, the sound of physical objects banging together, it propagates through an atmosphere in a predictable frequency range on any rocky planet.
Ah, okay.
Evolution selects for the ability to hear that specific range because if you can't hear a rock falling toward your head, you die.
Fair enough.
Furthermore, their cognitive intelligence levels are remarkably similar.
But wait, why wouldn't one be a million times smarter than the other, though? If their environments are so wildly different, shouldn't their brains have evolved on completely different scales?
That's a great question. Grace actually hypothesizes an evolutionary ceiling for intelligence. The idea is that a species' brain only develops as much as it needs to ensure survival.
So it just stops.
Pretty much. Once an organism is just smart enough to invent tools, build shelter, and outwit its planet's gravity and apex predators, the evolutionary pressure to grow a larger, more energy-hungry brain stops.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, once you can outthink the physical dangers of your home world, natural selection stops pushing your intelligence exponentially higher. You just level out.
Wow. So Grace and Rocky realize that both of their home systems, Earth and Arid, are suffering from the same dimming star infection. They're two halves of a whole, and they have to pool their wildly different biologies to survive.
And the narrative really anchors itself on this core idea. Cooperation across species is not just a heartwarming moral victory, it is a rigid biological necessity. Rocky possesses incredible material science. His ship is constructed from this indestructible alien material called xenonite, and he has harvested vast oceans of astrophage to use as fuel. But because Arid has an incredibly thick, dark atmosphere that blocks out the stars and all cosmic radiation, his species never had to study radiation to survive.
Oh, so they don't even know it's there.
Exactly. They don't understand relativity either. They launched their ship thinking the trip would take a few standard years, entirely ignorant of the time dilation that actually passed back home.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. But Grace brings the human understanding of advanced physics, radiation shielding, computing, and the rigorous human scientific method.
So they combine their resources and they make a massive breakthrough. By analyzing the planet's orbiting Tau Ceti, they find a thriving ecology in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant they named Adrian.
And within that highly specific carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere, they locate what they call Talmiba.
Yes, Kalmeba.
It's a microscopic natural predator that hunts and eats astrophage. They actually found the cure.
But of course, the universe is relentlessly hostile, and they face a devastating test of their cooperative science. To save their respective worlds, they must capture the Talmiba and engineer it to survive inside their ship's fuel tanks so it can be transported home.
Right, because otherwise it just dies in transit.
Exactly. But during their breeding experiments, they slam into a terrifying chemical barrier. Nitrogen. Nitrogen makes up roughly 78% of Earth's atmosphere. It is a fundamental building block of Arid's ammonia atmosphere. It is completely harmless, even essential to both human and Iridian biology. But to Talmiba, nitrogen is instantly, catastrophically lethal.
Yeah, just a tiny microscopic exposure to nitrogen gas instantly wipes out the entire sample of Talmiba. And without each other's specific environmental containment tools and scientific perspectives, they can't engineer a solution. Both species will just die.
But wait, let me push back on something here. If we look at the biological origins, the narrative heavily implies the panspermia theory, right?
Yes. The idea that Earth life, Iridian life, and even astrophage all share a common biological ancestor seeded across the stars billions of years ago.
Right. So if they all come from the exact same biological seed, how does nitrogen sustain two branches of that family tree while instantly murdering the third?
Well, it really highlights the brutal reality of evolutionary specialization.
Hmm.
I mean, the common ancestor is merely a foundational Lego brick. What gets built with that brick depends entirely on the environmental container it is placed in over billions of years.
Okay, so the environment shapes it entirely.
Right. Arid is a massive, dark, boiling pressure cooker. Earth is a temperate, watery sphere with lower gravity. The Taumiba evolved in the high radiation atmospheric layers of planet Adrian.
So they adapt to their specific niche.
Exactly. While the core building blocks remain similar at a molecular level, the organisms adapt so hyperspecifically to the exact parameters of their environment that anything outside of it becomes toxic. Life optimizes for its immediate surroundings, often at the cost of broader resilience.
That makes a lot of sense. So they ultimately managed to selectively breed a strain of Tomiba that can survive nitrogen exposure, securing this incredible cross-species victory.
Yeah.
But just as you feel this huge sense of triumph, the narrative pulls the floor out from under us with a deeply dark revelation regarding Grace's past.
Oh, this part is just rough.
It is. The amnesiac fog entirely lifts, and Grace finally remembers the real truth of his departure from Earth.
Up until this point, the entire journey, the audience and Grace himself, operates under the assumption that he was this noble, self-sacrificing astronaut, a man who bravely volunteered for a suicide mission to venture into the dark and save humanity.
Yeah.
But the restored memory reveals the exact opposite.
He was terrified. He was a complete coward. When Grace realized the mission was a one-way trip and he would die out there, he flat out refused to go. He begged. He threatened to sabotage the entire launch if they forced him aboard.
It was Strat, the authoritarian administrator, who forced him onto the Hail Mary.
Yes. She had guards restrain him and drugged him with a powerful, long-lasting amnesiac right before launch. The reason he woke up with no memory wasn't a computer malfunction. It was an intentional medical coma designed to ensure he wouldn't wake up in a panic and destroy the ship while still in the solar system.
It's such a gut punch. He isn't a brave savior. He is the hero of humanity entirely against his will.
And this realization profoundly shatters his self-image. Every act of bravery, every desperate scientific gamble he took in the Tau Ceti system was performed under the false assumption of his own inherent courage.
But the true, ultimate test of his character arrives immediately after this revelation. Having solved the nitrogen problem, Grace and Rocky part ways.
Right. Rocky sets a course back to Arid, and Grace prepared his unmanned beetle probes to carry the Tomiba cure back to Earth, readying himself to just die alone in his ship.
But Grace discovers a catastrophic flaw in their victory. By forcing the Tomiba to evolve a resistance to nitrogen, they accidentally forced it to develop an entirely new, unexpected physical trait.
The mutation.
The mutation. The organism developed the ability to slip right through the molecular lattice of xenonite.
Which is the incredibly dense, supposedly indestructible alien metal that Rocky's entire ship is built from.
Exactly. And the physical implications of that mutation are immediate and devastating. Grace does the math and realizes that the Tomiba aboard Rocky's ship will easily escape their containment farms.
Because they can just pass right through the walls.
Right. They will migrate through the xenonite bulkheads directly into Rocky's fuel bays, and once there, they will rapidly consume all of Rocky's astrophage fuel, leaving his vessel completely derelict. No power, no heat, no propulsion, just drifting endlessly in the dark void of interstellar space.
So Grace is suddenly faced with the ultimate choice. He actually has enough astrophage fuel left to return to Earth himself. He could launch the probes, fly home, be hailed as the undisputed savior of humanity, and live out the rest of his life on a rescued, grateful planet. Or he can send the probes back to Earth alone and use every drop of his remaining fuel to turn his ship around, track down Rocky's derelict vessel in the vastness of space, and physically escort his friend back to the Arid system.
But doing so carries a definitive, lethal cost. While Grace can supply the propulsion, human biology cannot process iridian food. The iridian biosphere is saturated with heavy metals that are highly toxic to the human digestive system.
Who you can't eat.
No. If Grace travels to Arid, he has no way to sustain himself. He is actively condemning himself to starve to death on an alien world.
He is forced to stare down the exact same choice he was far too cowardly to make back on Earth. But this time, there's no strat to drug him. There are no guards to force him onto the ship. It is a true, fully conscious decision to embark on a suicide mission.
He chooses Rocky.
He does. He chooses to sacrifice his life, his home, and his entire future for an alien friend. The author does note that Grace ultimately survives because Iridian scientists managed to painstakingly synthesize Earth-compatible food for him. But that survival doesn't retroactively lessen the sheer weight of the choice.
Not at all.
When Grace turns that ship around, he makes the decision fully, mathematically believing it is fatal.
It strips away all the technological marvels and scientific problem-solving to leave us with a purely human element. The defining characteristic of survival isn't just intelligence or geoengineering. It's the capacity for self-sacrifice.
We started this deep dive talking about the sheer terror of waking up in an amnesiac nightmare, your entire identity locked away by trauma and fear. But maybe losing the person you thought you were is the only way to become the person you actually need to be.
That's a really powerful way to look at it.
It leaves you with a haunting question to mull over long after the story ends. What actually makes a hero? Is it the fearless volunteer who marches willingly into the fire, fully confident in their own strength? Or is it the terrified coward, dragged kicking and screaming into the abyss, who, when finally given the freedom to walk away, sacrifices his only chance at home to save a friend whose face he can't even see? Keep exploring the thoughts behind the words.